Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeanette Smith, Outreach Chair here at Allisonville Christian Church and a member of the Shalom Zone Committee, I guess is what we call ourselves. I don't know if Shalom Zone is a collaboration between 6 congregations up here in this portion of Indy. And we very much welcome you this evening to this screening of Food Insecure. You all came in the door 1, I assume. If anyone needs a restroom, it's on your right as you came through that door, so it's straight through the narthex, as we call it, and the restrooms are on your left. If there were any sort of emergency, we would go back out the main door where we came in. There are also coat hooks through that door. If anybody wants to hang their coat, feel free to keep it with you or drape it over the pew. But we will go ahead and cue up the movie, and then after, it's about a half an hour, and after the film is done, then we will have a panel discussion with a couple folks who graciously agreed to join us and talk to us about the film and what they see here in Indianapolis and central Indiana and all of Indiana with Dave's perspective about the food insecurity.
Now it's just, can I live? I'm trying to live a tad bit more than I lived before or the day before. I want to have enough food today.
If there was an emergency and we couldn't move any further, then that would be the end of it. You know, it would be walking to the neighborhood center. We wouldn't be able to make it out to the other food bank and get that food and bring it back.
We're trying to grow, we're trying to make more money, but the more we do, the more we lose, especially when it comes to food. And I don't have that security anymore.
Here's what you may not know about hunger in Indiana. Survey results new in 2024 of more than 800 Hoosiers who needed food assistance show they infrequently go hungry, but their sense of food insecurity, having no certainty where their next meals would come from, was stunning. Greater than 90% were food insecure, even though they were eating, and 60% of their food was providing poor nutrition. Food insecurity leads to poorer health, poor performance of students in school, and lower productivity at work. With the stress of the pandemic lockdown fresh in American minds, it would be easy to think those were the days when our neighbors, out of work and out of school, struggled the most to feed their families. But we would be wrong. Hunger among working Hoosiers is more prevalent now, almost 2 years after the end of the pandemic, than in the last decade. Results of a recent first-of-its-kind survey of families across the state were deeply concerning. Families needing food assistance were 50% more likely to go hungry than in prior surveys. This new research shows where food assistance is needed, food insecurity persists, regardless of where you live in Indiana. But we are still left with the question, when food is so plentiful and state unemployment so low, what barriers do working Hoosiers face when it comes to keeping their families fed? Well, the specifics can be different for every family. The outcome is the same. In this program, we'll get a deeper understanding of the so-called benefits cliff, learn what the acronym ALICE means, and hear firsthand why the health outcomes of food insecurity are impacting the bottom line of the entire state of Indiana.
This may sound funny coming from a food banker, but food insecurity is not about food.
Fred Glass is the president and CEO of Gleaners Food Bank. Gleaners supplies food directly to residents in central Indiana, as well as to food pantries in 21 counties.
Food insecurity is not about poverty. People are hungry because they're poor, because they can't access the plentiful food that is out there.
There's barriers that have really kept a lot of people from being able to navigate and have the right amount of nutrition to thrive.
It's also important to not lose sight of the fact that we're talking about individual people and individual families that are really struggling to make ends meet.
Dr. Emily Warnell is a researcher with the Center for Local and State Policy at Ball State University in Muncie. Her research focuses on rural Hoosiers.
I think that is one of the kind of stereotypes about living in rural places is that it's very idyllic, and there's all of these really strong social networks that help people survive, and if you need support or your family isn't doing well, you can go down to the local neighborhood church and they're going to help you and everything's going to be fine. In reality, there's a lot of poverty. There was one time where this girl pulled up, it was about 5:15 at night. And she comes here, she never been to a food pantry, never wanted for anything in her life. Her husband left her, took the money out, the checking account, left her with 3 kids. She's out there crying, I'm out there crying, I'm gonna cry out. And it was one of those moments that you knew why you were here. She comes every month. She's got her job down, but it's not enough to make ends meet. She was just stuck.
In Indiana, 500,000 working families are struggling to put food on the table. A whopping 41% of Indiana jobs are not paying a living wage, forcing families to rely on multiple low-paying jobs. Often, they still don't have enough food to keep their families fed. These are adults who expect to work in order to pay their bills, but because a living wage remains out of reach, they are often forced to rely on assistance. We're going to meet working families, wage earners from around the state making tough decisions on how to keep food on the table. Some who earn too much to qualify for assistance programs, and some who are trying to move their way off of assistance. For those determined to get off assistance, another barrier stands between them and nutritious meals. It is aptly named the benefits cliff.
If they accept that job or that increase in pay, they can lose those benefits. That is what we call the benefits cliff, because when a person receives an additional amount of pay, they fall off of the cliff, and that cliff is where the benefits are, and they leave the benefits behind.
For a household who goes 1 cent over the federal poverty guideline for their household size, their benefits completely disappear. The ground falls out from under them and they are right back where they started, with no resources to help get them to where they had been.
There is no one circumstance that could place families in a situation of food insecurity. Kayla Justice and her husband from Fort Wayne had always worked.
I was on my 3rd pregnancy. I had a lot of complications with that. I was looking to work. And at the time, he was working for a factory that ended up shutting down, so he got laid off. We didn't have a lot of community in our lives, so it was kind of like a domino effect from there. We lost our jobs, we lost our source of income. We ended up losing our house. We ended up in our car, and eventually we lost our kids as well. We were in motels. There wasn't a lot of resources out there for us. It took us about a year and a half to get back on our feet. Even then, we still struggled, and it was hard. But we're slowly but surely making our way up, thanks to the community we now have and the resources we now have available. But it's still a struggle. We're going through something called the cliff effect. And you make just enough to receive benefits, but not enough to get by. The loss of the SNAP benefits was massive. We were able to put food on the table all month, and we were able to compensate and have food for our kids, especially in the summertime with our kids being home full-time. It was very difficult, and now I'm finding myself having to go back to food banks at some portion of the month because we can't afford to buy food for the whole month. And even with couponing and going to different stores and using saving apps, it's not enough. It's not enough. I oftentimes go without meals just so my kids can have more all week until they're finished. They want more, I'll take less later. Because I don't want them to see what we're going through. It's hard to think about our dreams and our goals when we're constantly worrying about putting food on the table and putting our family first and worrying about what's best for them. It's almost like a juggling act. it's difficult because we want to do all these things and accomplish all these things, but we're worried about putting food on the table, making rent payments, utility payments, especially now because we've lost our SNAP. That affects our other bills and our other expenses. It almost feels like we're being punished for trying to get ahead in life.
I've been off food stamps for, I think, going on 6 or 7 years now.
Heidi Oates Smith grew up in a working-class family, and although she needed SNAP benefits when her children were small, her goal was to be persistent and move them off the SNAP roll.
Because I didn't want to have to be dependent on food stamps, so I guess the struggle for food right now is, well, we had to adapt when we first got off, of course. And we found out that the journey was not necessarily cheap. Right now I have a total of 3 jobs. If it's hard for people that are not working, and it's hard for people that are working, I don't know where we're going. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not logical.
Liz and Nigel Rowe of Clinton in northern Indiana readily admit they've made mistakes that have impacted their family. They also know they've spent the last few years working hard to recover, only to face more barriers.
Some of those past mistakes have definitely followed us. I have a pre-nursing degree now, and I started for my bachelor's degree, and I should have no issues getting a job. But my past still hinders me from being able to use that degree and move forward in the ways that I want to.
I mean, I understand you keep making the same mistakes, but you're not trying. I mean, it's just rough. It's rough.
We're spending countless hours and money driving just to make sure that we can afford to have all of the things that we need. The time and energy, gas money it takes to go do that's insane. If they happen to come in and possess our car today or Monday, we have no vehicle. And it's hard because you have so many issues that are constantly coming at you that you kind of have to just decide which one's most important right now and go that route. But unfortunately, when it's all of these situations like vehicle and electric and food, those are life or death situations. You know what I mean? These are things that we need, period. That's not like, oh, I can't afford one new pair of shoes. It's like, oh, I can't afford dinner. It's scary.
Kayla says she and her husband were adrift without community. Now, she and Heidi are both part of a program in the U.S. and Canada called Circles, a step-by-step program operated through churches. Circles pairs participants with volunteer allies to help them stay on track with greater financial independence.
We don't provide services or funds to pay your rent. We provide intentional friendship, relationship, community, social capital, accountability, acts, and encouragement to people that are on a journey to self-sufficiency. We prefer to say stability. Nobody is self-sufficient. We all need somebody.
Marie Weiss directs Circles in Indianapolis. She thought she knew what poverty was about, and then realized she had no idea.
It was after I started working with Circles that, and I had sit down and have coffee kind of friends who were economically, racially, culturally different from me, that I began to really understand what it was all about and what the barriers were. I didn't have a clue. The only way that transformation happened in my life was because I became in a relationship with somebody who was different from me. It transformed my life. I jokingly say that I'm no longer good at dinner parties. Because when a comment is made about people eating bonbons on the couch off the government's dollar, I know that that's not true. Food insecurity is having diabetes and being able to pay my rent but not having any money left to buy healthy food.
Indeed, the cost of food insecurity in Indiana is unsustainable. Feeding America reports that food insecurity increases Indiana healthcare costs by $1.8 billion each year. Dr. Jennifer Stanley has a family medical practice in a small rural community in southeastern Indiana. She sees the impact of food insecurity in her patients every day.
We are well aware that folks who have social and economic barriers are less likely to have good health as they age. And honestly, a lot of them don't make it past 65 or 70. We see that often. And whether that's transportation that they can get to care, whether that's the ability to buy healthy food, whether that's the ability to have time to exercise. I mean, I've got plenty of moms and dads who are working 2 jobs, working a job and a half. And when I talk to them about exercising for 30 minutes a day, they literally laugh because where am I going to fit that in?
Linda Beck decided to come off of Social Security and go to work. She changed her financial situation for the better, but simultaneously changed her food situation for the worse.
I decided to come off of Social Security and go back to work. Higher bills, of course, but a nicer place to live. The issue is, like, I'm doing well with my bills, but when it comes to food, I struggle, especially with diabetes. I find that I have to get processed, boxed things to make it stretch. Because there's just not enough money. Doctors ask me to get fresh fruits and vegetables, lean meats, things like that. When my doctor and I talk, he gets frustrated if I come in and my blood sugars are really high because they give me a list of everything that I'm supposed to do, everything I'm supposed to eat. And so when I come in, sometimes my sugars are good, sometimes they're not. And he gets frustrated, and I tell him I can't afford to eat the way you want me to. That doesn't make any sense to them. And it's frustrating for me because they feel like I'm not complying.
So nutrition is really the foundation of our bodies. I mean, it helps us build healthy, strong bodies as children. It helps us build strong connective tissue, bones, muscles. As we get older, we know that nutrition, specifically types of food, high-fat food, high-calorie food, increases the risk of diseases like coronary artery disease, cerebrovascular disease, increased risk of strokes, increased risk of heart attacks, increased risk of peripheral vascular disease, problems with heart failure. So it really does affect all aspects of our health. Unfortunately, we're seeing more and more disease at a younger age, and a lot of it, I think, can be traced back to poor nutrition, highly processed foods. So somebody comes in with an acute wound, and we tell them not to walk because they can't put pressure on their foot. So they have to stay off work, and if they don't go to work, they don't get paid, so then it becomes an issue of being able to afford healthcare, being able to afford their medicines, being able to afford their food.
Mary Hoosier of Scott County is also among the hundreds and thousands of Hoosiers not eating like she should because good food costs real money. She works in a food pantry and sees clients in the same situation she is in. She has 2 jobs and writes her budget out week by week, but still cannot eat the way her doctor wants her to.
A lot of farmers bring their fresh produce into the pantry, which is big help to myself and our clients who many of them are diabetics or have heart problems or blood pressure problems. You know, you're watching salt because of your blood pressure, or you have kidney problems and you have to watch all sorts of things. It makes it hard to manage your money, buy the foods that you need, and eat properly, knowing that you have to do this to keep your body where it needs to be, and the options just aren't always there.
The Hoosier workforce cannot survive, much less thrive, when over 40% of those working don't even make the current living wage of $21 an hour. The Hoosier economy pays the price. Dennis Murphy is the CEO of Indiana University Health, one of the largest employers in the state of Indiana. He is well aware of what low wages do to the state's economy, its ability to bring in high-quality workers, and the reputations of Indiana employers. Several years ago, IU began bringing all employees up to a living wage. With recent inflation, Murphy knows the health system he oversees will soon have to take systemic action for employees once more.
You know, having a healthy workforce is critical if you're trying to be in the right mindset to actually take care of others. So you can probably only bring as much to the job as you have yourself. And so we actually started to go and look at the health of the workforce and say, what were we doing to address some of these social impediments to health? Do you have a good job? Do you have access to food? Food is important for those who are seriously or critically ill. Then we think about these broader issues in the state of just what our health statistics look like. And Indiana does our rank great.
Murphy knows IU Health isn't in the food supply business, but as a statewide health organization, choosing key partners can make an important impact. The nutrition hub at IU Memphis Hospital is just one example.
We partner with the American Heart Association, Purdue University, and Gleaners as our critical resources to make this program a success. This is an oasis in the desert.
United Way of Central Indiana is a not-for-profit organization with the specific goal of distancing families from poverty. We have a goal of ensuring that we're helping people to live the lives they're capable of living.
A population United Way works with closely is called the ALICE population. ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained but Employed. Chances are you know someone who qualifies as an ALICE family. By listening to our neighbors and seeking creative solutions to our systemic challenges, food insecurity can be addressed. It requires coordinated action in multiple areas: corporations, faith communities, government, and the private sector.
Each one has a lane and a role to play, and I think right now in Central Indiana, we have one of the best appetites for collaboration. The challenge is ensuring that we can focus that collaboration and act with a little bit of urgency, because our people and our neighbors need us to do so.
I can't just go out and make it so that this many people aren't struggling with food insecurity. I can't go out and change that for the millions of people in the United States who struggle to put food on the table every single day. But what I think is very important to do if you care about those issues is to start gathering some information with other people in your community. But who else do I know that cares about this? Who else do I know who's already working on this issue? If you go find people who are already doing the work to change those systems, people who are organizing, people who are advocating for widespread systemic change, if I can get together with 100 people, 200 people, if we can organize institutions that care a lot about this work, if I can get leaders of those institutions to tell their member of Congress, this matters to me, all of that activity, all that communication will indicate to this member of Congress, this decision maker, that this is something that many people care about and are willing to do something about. And it might signal to them that they should do something about it too.
There are proven solutions. For example, for 1 year during the pandemic, an expanded child tax credit lifted half of children out of poverty, a remarkable impact.
During the pandemic, the child tax credit went back to families, and the research shows that families spent it on essential needs. They weren't saving it, they weren't using it extravagantly. They were using it to pay for their food budget and their rent and their utilities, because there wasn't sufficient income in the household to do that.
The child tax credits that we got during the pandemic definitely made a world of difference for us. We were struggling, Nigel was struggling, and it was the only relief that we had at the time.
There are efforts in the advocacy community across the country to bring back the child tax credit to make it something that is a more meaningful benefit for households across the country. It was very effective and very targeted to families that needed that assistance. It's currently tied a little bit in Congress.
Maybe in my thinking it's more simple than what it actually is, but I think if people are struggling with resources, they don't have enough money, money is actually the thing that will solve that issue. You know, so putting money into the hands of people who don't have enough trusting and believing that those individuals are resilient, they are competent, they are resourceful, and they know what to do with money. You know, there was all this pushback about the sort of money that was given out to everyone through the pandemic. But then there was money that had continued to come in, and people were able to buy their own food. People were able to pay their bills. I think we have to dispel this idea that folks are lazy and they're unmotivated and they're just looking for a handout.
I would challenge some of our corporations to look at their practices to see how it can better serve our neighbors. You know, they have that pressure to meet quarterly dividends, but our families have pressures to meet new meals. And so, how can they work together? I don't know, smart people than I can figure that out, but we need to solve both.
That means we care enough about people to give to those causes that will make their lives better. And there's no better cause that I can think of than helping people have enough food that they might be able to live and live an abundant life. I think the biggest challenge for communities of faith is to first demonstrate hospitality, graciousness, compassion, and love.
Food pantries are not the solution. They're a band-aid. We try to help as many people as we can, but it just isn't enough. And there needs to be systemic change by government, by community, by corporate. We're in the poverty alleviation business. We have a common foe. Whether it's healthcare, housing, food insecurity, and that common foe is poverty.
Policy solutions at the state and federal level that address the root causes of food insecurity have the chance to make the largest impact. But policy takes time. Food insecure Hoosiers need food now. Fortunately, agencies and employers who see the crisis are finding creative ways to ease the pain for workers trying to access food.
As part of the Working Hungry documentary, we brought it here to Plymouth, and we kind of had this little showing, and as part of that, our chamber director came down to watch. And she contacted me shortly after that, and she's like, "Yes, we've got it. That was so touching to me. I've got to figure out a way to get this out to the community. How can we do that?" And so what she ended up doing was sending it out to her board members and had them kind of preview it. So one business owner kind of shyly spoke up towards the end of it and said, "I just really feel like I need to share with you that after I watched this, I went back to my business and I just started going around and talking to my employees and asking them questions about their lives and their lives at home. And what she learned was that beyond caring for their own children, a lot of them were caring for a parent or an elderly grandparent or a sibling or some other adult in their life that they were also caring for and providing for. And she was humbled by that, kind of taken back by that, and realized when they come in, sometimes they're tired, and maybe it's not that they wasted their night away, but they were up with, both ends of the caring that they were doing for people. And so she actually went through and raised her wages. She has talked about how it just changed the atmosphere in her environment, that they're eager to come to work, they're more productive, they are sharing life with each other, and it's just a totally different environment. And so it was a win for everyone across the board.
I know a surplus community where their employer decided to give everybody a bus pass instead of a raise, and so all of their transportation issues for getting to work were taken care of by that monthly bus pass. So in a way, they were able to get a raise without getting a raise that would affect their benefits.
Hunger is not person. Hunger is not Republican. Hunger is not Democrat. Hunger is not libertarian. Hunger is a slap in the face of society. And hunger is not known by anyone. Hunger is something that everybody ought to work on.
There's, just bare minimum things that I need, and I'm going to bend until I break if I push it too much.
We definitely need systemic change for families to flourish. We can't be worried about putting food on the table and you pay for bills if we want to grow and prosper. You can get up and you can start walking again, and and you'll get where you want to go if you don't stop. You can help other people pick themselves up along the way, and as long as we're all walking together, we will get where we need to go.
A lot of things to think about there. Now I want to welcome, I lost my list, Dave Miner, who's one of the producers of this video, and Kelsey, what's your last name again? Burton, who is Executive Director of Mid-North Food Pantry. That is a food pantry that a number of our Shalom Zone faith communities support. So they serve, well, I'll let them introduce themselves and describe briefly their organization.
Yeah, so I'm Kelsey, and I started at the food pantry about October, so I'm fairly new to the food insecurity game. But what I've learned very quickly is we have a pretty big need here, as you guys could see in the video, and that need, unfortunately, is growing every single day. So we serve about 450 families a week. That number is, again, going up every week. When I have calls with my pantry manager, he'll say today was 180, today was 160, today was 170. So we continue to increase. And I polled right before I came up here. For last year, we served over 17,000 families, which is about 58,000 individuals. So we are not the biggest food pantry, right, in Indianapolis. We're a bigger one because we're open 3 days a week. So a lot of food pantries may only be open once or twice a week or twice a month. We are open 3 days a week. And then in addition to the food that we provide, we also provide basic necessities, so toiletries, and it kind of goes to what the video was saying a little bit. Getting benefits is really hard for people. There's a lot of hoop jumping. There is, they have to go to this office to get rent support, this office to get utility support, and so forth. And we've learned if we say to them, they come in and say, we need toilet paper, or we need soap. If we say to them, hey, you can go to this place, it's one more hurdle for them to jump. So we're trying to remove that for as many people as possible. And we serve anyone in Indiana. The two criteria are they have to have lived in the state for at least 1 day. That means they're a Hoosier. I don't know if you guys knew that, but that's how the state identifies a Hoosier. And the second is we're a TFAP pantry. So that's the Emergency Food Assistance Program. In order to qualify under that program that provides free food to us as a pantry, an individual has to self-identify that they make 185% of the poverty level. And so we aren't checking that. We ask, do you fit these food or these income guidelines? And they have to give us some kind of positive response. If they say no, if they don't have an answer, they do not leave empty-handed. We always have food to give them. We don't turn anyone away. And yeah, I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. I do see lots of volunteers here, and without volunteers, without the financial support of our community, without the food from the USDA's TFAP program, it would be impossible for us to serve the neighbors that we serve.
Dave Miner, I've been retired I had a corporate career at Lilly and retired more than a dozen years ago, and I've been full-time working on hunger since. Helped found Indie Hunger Network, Bread for the World, which is an advocacy policy organization, helped found the Good Wages Initiative, made some documentaries, sort of whatever needed doing, if you will. And one of the things that has been deeply frustrating is a lot of stereotypes, which are highly inaccurate, and those prevent, I think, good policy solutions. And so Shannon Cagle, who was the producer for the film, approached me, like the first film, she approached me about 6 years before I said yes to doing the film with her, because I didn't know how to do a film, number one, but I didn't know exactly how it was going to fit in or make a difference. But then the more times we saw, like Marie Weiss talked about in the film, this, highly inaccurate statement about people who are just sitting home, thought that maybe by making films we could start to do some education, and that might make a difference. So that's how I came to be involved in documentary filmmaking. My career at Lilly had nothing to do with documentary filmmaking.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I've got a couple questions that I'm going to ask, and then if you all have questions, we should have time to get those around, and I'll bring the microphone around to you, so be thinking about what kind of questions you have. Dave, as you said, you were making the film, this film and the previous film, so what was your motivation for doing that, and do you feel that it's accomplished what you set out to accomplish?
Yeah, I think so. The first film, we know of at least 66 showings around the state, so just like tonight, has been shown all over the place. We're on track, we think, this time with the second film to have at least 100 showings, and that's, that seems like it's helping. And you heard, I think, an example in here. Chris Garner from Plymouth talked about the chamber director saw the film and went back and shared the film with other members of the chamber, and one of them talked to their employees and realized Chris has another beautiful story. So we have some evidence, at least, that we're seeing real things happening from it. So yeah, it's encouraging. Did I fully get your question?
Yeah, I think so. Kelsey, as you watched the film, I don't know if you screened it, the sneak peek, I gave you the link. Was there anything in there that surprised you from your experience from Mid-North?
I mean, not really. Those of us that are on the front lines, we're seeing, that's a really good portrayal of what we're seeing every day. I think the thing I really think is beautiful about this video is it gives a face to those that kind of go throughout the day being faceless, right? Or they're kind of hidden, right? So, when you're walking down the street or you're sitting in your cubicle next to someone else, you may not know that they're facing food insecurity. And this does such a good job of normalizing that it's everybody, right? It can be anyone that you interact with. It can be people in this room. They're mentioning some of the people that work at a food pantry and are shopping at the food pantry. We have that same instance where we have volunteers that volunteer for us and shop there. Their other volunteers may not know that, right? They may not know that they're volunteering alongside someone who needs that support. And I think, too, you talked about stereotypes, and I feel like all of us in this room, this is part of how we can all be advocates for individuals facing food insecurity is, sometimes I'll hear a volunteer or someone say, well, they drove a really nice car up to the food pantry. They don't really need this food. Or she had her nails done. Or they have a cell phone. Or whatever. And I always use those opportunities to stop right then, pull them to the side and just say, number one, we're not the food police. All right? If somebody shows up and they need food and they say they need food, we're giving them food. And number two, those assumptions are really tough. As you saw, these are people, they aren't, we envision, food insecurity, someone who's hungry is crouched down, under a bridge, experiencing homelessness. That's not always the case, and this video does such a good job of showing that. And so, using that opportunity to say they could have houses and cars and, God forbid they do something to bring joy to their life, like get their nails done or their hair done or whatever. But they're people, right? And so, I think that's what we have to remind people, especially those that are on the front lines. And sometimes I know when we're there serving people, it can get tough on certain days or certain individuals can be tough. But no one's showing up to a food pantry unless they need it. It is not, especially our food pantry, it's in the basement. It's not, a beautiful setting. Our volunteers make it as, fun and inviting as they can, and it actually has a really good vibe, but it's not a fun thing to do. It's not fun to stand outside and wait in line, take your ticket, go downstairs, get your food, and then get that home. So, I just always urge you, if you hear that, if you hear people saying that, challenge them a little bit, right? You know, some of the easiest loans for somebody to get, a predatory loan, are car loans. So they might have a nice car, they might have it nice, they may have lost their job yesterday, and they've always been able to afford it up to that point. For us to think that for them to need service, they have to be, you know, have nothing in their lives, and that's the only reason we're going to serve them, it's just such a backwards way of thinking. So this video, that's what I love about these videos, is that it can be anyone, and it can be anyone. I mean, it could be me tomorrow, right? I mean, we know we're in a country that we can be one hospital visit away, right, from being in trouble. And so, yeah, there's just, it's great. You did a great job on the video, and it is something that, you know, they have the link, but I do recommend you share, you know, with as many people as you can.
So you made a comment about advocating for people. I've got kind of a, hopefully this is a softball question to Dave. So I'll make an assumption that most of you heard about this through church, but why should I as a Christian be involved in advocating for food policy, for the child tax credit to be reinstated? You know, especially things can get really tense in political settings, so situations. So what would you say to that if somebody said,
so
why me?
I'd start out saying, you know, I'm a scientist by training, and I looked at the data, right, and I looked at how things work. And when Indy Hunger Network was getting started, we looked at the data, and 90% of the food that goes to the hungry was coming from the federal nutrition programs. 90%. So, which doesn't take anything from the good work of Mid-North or anybody else, but we better, if we actually want to end hunger, we better pay attention. There was a budget that passed the House of Representatives in the first Trump administration, and we did the calculations to see what that would mean if it was enacted. And it was going to take away 50 million meals a year from kids, veterans, and seniors just in the state of Indiana. 50 million meals. Oh, and by the way, it was a 10-year budget, 500 million meals. And oh, by the way, that's not counting the adults that were impacted. It was 1 billion meals just in the state of Indiana. It's like, you know, we need to do something about that, right? We're already struggling. There's no way that Kelsey and everybody else is going to, you know, offset that. So if we want to end hunger as people of faith, all major traditions are called to feed the hungry. If we actually want to do that, we have to pay attention to policy as well. It'd be great if we could just hand out enough at food pantries and that was enough, but we are so far from that. SNAP alone right now is 60% of all food, all by itself. So we sort of have to pay attention. You know, and I would, one more thing. There aren't many politicians who think that hunger's a really good thing. There's no hunger caucus in Congress, right? Now, they all will differ on how we should approach it. But actually, hunger is something that we can approach in a bipartisan way. I know that's particularly difficult right at the moment, but in general, Republicans and Democrats can get together on stuff. We have a couple of international bills that came through in the last 5 or 10 years. One was called the Global Food Security Act, which was about what the name says. The other one also the name was descriptive. It was the Malnutrition Prevention and Treatment Act. One of those we have 9 congressmen in Indiana. One of those, all 9 of them signed on to it. The other one, 8 out of the 9 signed on to it. Now, does that happen all the time? No. But it did happen. It happened more than once. So there is hope. The best solutions, Bread for the World believes, the best solutions are bipartisan. Because if it's just one party or the other, the next time, you know, the responsibility shifts, they'll scrap what the other group did. So the best solutions are ones that both parties can be in agreement on.
Kelsey, I had a question for you about the child tax credit and whether you have seen at Mid-North the response. I guess Dave sent me some statistics that the child tax credit cut the rate of children in poverty in half for 1 year during the COVID pandemic, and that but then it's doubled now in 2022 and even increased more in 2023. Do you see that in your food pantry? What's your experience?
So it's hard for us to pinpoint why somebody's coming, right? Like we aren't asking them. We do very low barrier, so it's just, name, zip code, do you qualify, how many people in your household, and that's it. So we're not asking them, are you here because you lost other benefits or whatever. But what I can tell you is, and Jim knows this because he's on the board, that I was sharing some numbers recently with the board of the trajectory that we are on. And since the beginning of this year, we are on such an exponential growth pattern, it is going to be unsustainable for us. And like you said, this is not something food pantries can solve. We are that kind of, like they said, a Band-Aid, right? We are there trying to get food to people in that last stop, right? This is one of the only places that people can go if they don't qualify for benefits as well. So hot meals and food pantries, if you don't qualify for SNAP and WIC and things like that, you can go to food pantries or hot meals and that you will get served. So we are really that last line of defense. If SNAP and all those benefits were to go away and that 60% of that pie were to disappear, that means that, and food pantries are only 4% of the food that we get when you look at the pie, right? It's only 4% that we're solving. If that 50 to 60% goes away from SNAP, where do you think they're going to go, right? They're going to come to the food pantries and the food banks, and you guys, we can't do that. I wish I could say tomorrow I will win the lottery and we will have all the food and all the things we need, but that's not a sustainable model at all. It's hard to know, why they're coming, but I can tell you without a doubt that they are coming in droves, and we are seeing more people than we've ever seen in the 40-year history of this food pantry. And it has been an unsettling time the last couple of months for a lot of reasons, but there's just a lot of uncertainty, and our neighbors are scared. They don't feel confident, they don't feel safe.
I was at, you saw Circles in the film, I was at the Circles meeting on Thursday night, and the woman sitting next to me said she felt like this. She said, this feels like a war on the poor, that all these things are hitting them, and they were already struggling. So,
yeah. I was going to comment, I volunteer at the Linwood Christian Church food pantry that Allisonville supports, and there's another volunteer there that volunteers at yet another pantry, and they were saying last week they were closed because they ran out of food. They normally are open once every week, and they couldn't. Are there any questions in the audience? People that...
Thanks, Jeanette. I have one for each of you guys, okay? Dave, I know the effort, my understanding of the effort of Bread for the World has been really to basically lobby the federal government. And we all know that's where most of the money is, so I get that. But given the current situation, what we're seeing from the federal government, all the cuts and what have you, has there been an effort within Indiana? And do you think there's any receptivity there, in the state itself?
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good question. The way that the federal nutrition programs were set up, the money and the structure and the guidelines all come from Congress, but then the state administers them. So the state has to spend some money for staff, to run them, but it's not been a big investment for the state. So if the state were to pick it up, it would be a really big change for them. And I would say charitably, they don't have much of a track record on these sorts of things. So I'm not terribly hopeful, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah. The one thing, if I could wave a magic wand and just do one thing in the state of Indiana, I would get them to make the processes for application for benefits smooth and easy. They'll always be rigorous, right? Because that's the parameters that Congress has set down. But it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a PhD, you shouldn't have to have a PhD, right, to apply for benefits. And it's not easy, right? And there have to be ways to make that more. I know there's other states who have done a much better job in implementing the programs so that it's not so hard for people to apply. And yeah.
Do you know if there's been any much lobbying effort in the state?
The network of food banks, you saw Emily Weichert Bryant a couple of times in the film. She is the FISH, it's called FISH for short, Feeding Indiana's Hungry. Emily is the executive director of FISH, and honestly, I think Emily spends 75% of her time focusing on Indiana state policy, maybe 15% of the rest on federal policy, but she's a lobbyist. Emily's a lobbyist and a good one. So yes, there are efforts. One of my personal interests is Bread for the World has focused historically on federal, but I'd like to see us spend some time on state legislators as well. So, because they matter. And sometimes they end up in Congress after they were in the state legislature. We've got a couple of those right now.
And I have one for Kelsey too. What's the challenge in providing nutritious food? We heard about food, obviously food is food, but there's a need for nutritious food too. What do you see the challenges there for food pantries?
Yeah, I love that question. So we work really hard at Mid-North to provide a lot of produce and fresh food for them because we are in a food desert where there's not a lot of grocery stores and a lot of things that are readily accessible. A lot of our neighbors get their food from gas stations, right, or dollar stores. And so we have a garden that we, are lucky that we have a space for that. We partner with the garden from the Indiana State Fairgrounds as well, so we get a lot of produce from them. But the biggest challenge for us is, we get a lot of our food from that USDA TFAB program. Now, a lot of that is produce and milk and things like that. But there's always, quite a bit in there that's high salt content or, things like that, where we try when we were purchasing the food to do low sodium, low sugar, because a lot of our neighbors do have underlying health issues. And we may be the only opportunity they have to be able to eat, like the people in the video were saying, under their doctor's guidelines. We also provide a health clinic that we have open once a month during certain months of the year for them to do screenings for diabetes, blood pressure, kidney disease. And then that way, if they come in, they know now, hey, I have high, their blood sugars are high. We can help by providing as many options that have those low sugars or educating them as we can. But it's not always in our control. I mean, when you come through our line too, you're still going to see sweets. You're still going to see, because also people love that, right? We don't want to, we don't want them to not ever get sticky buns or whatever it is that we happen to have donated at that time. But we try to make it a place for them to be able to get that healthy food. But education is probably the biggest thing. And the other thing, the woman in the movie said it was really difficult for her to financially shop for the food. It is for us as a pantry too. We only spend $3.18 per family. So that is teeny tiny. We would love to be able to purchase all sorts of different proteins and things like that. We just can't afford it. And especially not, the more people we serve, the less we have per family to pay. And yeah, we don't get government funding besides TFAB. We completely rely on the generosity of our individual and corporate donors and grant funders. And I do fear that because a lot of government funding is being cut, the funds that are available are now going to be stretched even thinner. And so that's where, I don't want to say all hope's lost at all, but that's where communities like this that can lean in and do food drives or monetary drives. One of our biggest expenses is eggs. Very popular item for us, but I'm telling you, I'm so sick of dealing with eggs. Oh my gosh, I have dreams about eggs now. But the price is finally starting to come down, but it is a great protein source. It's something most of our neighbors cannot afford. It's something we love to be able to provide, and we don't want to stop providing that, but, it's a balance between how much do we spend on one item versus, what else is out there. And so the health is always, we are constantly focused on that. I visit lots of other food pantries. I saw lots of them in the video that I've been to as well and thought, hey, I know them. But, everybody's food pantry and their TFAP allocations are different too. I was, amazed at, 1 week I'm like, okay, we got tons of apples and juice and stuff this week. And I went to another food pantry and they mostly got popcorn and, other things that week. So it's not across the board standard, and I don't know what we're getting till like the month before. So we get, and it's not like we can plan ahead and say, hey, we know in April we're not going to get any fruit, so maybe we should do a fruit drive or something. We don't know. I get an email from Gleaners that says, surprise, here's what you get this month. And then we kind of know a week at a time what we're getting. So we think on our feet a lot.
So if you wanted to, how would you organize a showing of this? And how would you, who would you invite? Because, you talked about one person there, they happen to go to the showing, and then they own a business, and then he goes and talks to the employees, and they get a raise, which is like fabulous. But how do you find those people, and how do you organize something like that to make,
Yeah, that's a good question. And by the way, I brought a list, copies of a list of 5 things that we can do from a systemic standpoint. The top one I put on there was show the film. As we were standing around beforehand, the more times it's shown, the more people that see it. It's good for the reach and people thinking about it, but it's also good for our work with political figures when we can tell them, hey, 65 showings of this around the state, 100 showings of this around the state. Your constituents are hearing about it, you ought to pay attention to this. So thank you for the question, Corinne. Showings are good. I feel like we've done really well with sort of social workers and teachers and folks, all the people who work at food pantries. But who we really need to be seeing this are business leaders, political leaders. We're organizing a showing in 3 weeks downtown at 16 Tech, and we're working through visible business leaders and business organizations, hoping we can get a good turnout of business leaders. But to your question specifically, Corinne, the film is available. Both films are available on our website for free. You can stream them. There's a resource guide in there that gives you guidance on how to organize a showing, things to make your social media work easier, just a whole variety of things to support you setting up a showing. And then the magic, I feel like I've learned from organizing work for a long time now is just making invitations, right? You can do general publicity, and that's a good thing to do, but the most impactful thing is just inviting specific people, in your congregation or somebody that you know, and get them out to the showing. Yeah. Yes. You got a question in the front? No. Oh, sorry. Just rearranging your hair. That's okay. That's all right.
I was wondering if you're noticing any reductions or restrictions in TFAP at this moment, or if it's
not right now, but there have been, as you guys have seen, budget cuts, for some different food, and we were affected slightly with the one that recently, I think it was $100 billion or something like that was cut, and it did affect farms that give food to food banks and food pantries. We were getting ready to start a new relationship with one of those farms, and they reached out and said, we have the seeds in the ground and we have no idea what to do next. We're feeling it a little bit that way. If they were to cut or reduce TFAP, it would be a huge issue. And so I'm just being hopeful, right? People always think I have a magic 8-ball, and I really don't.
It's impossible to know, right? The last time the tariffs were put in place, it impacted the farmers so badly that the administration felt like they had to do something for the farmers. And so they were actually pushing more food out as a way of supporting the farmers. So God only knows.
I had one other question. So does Food for the World, any of their policy things go toward, it seems like maybe a livable wage and raising, the minimum wage would be an important factor?
That's an interesting question. One of the things, so it's Bread for the World. We work on domestic, that's right. We work on domestic and international policy at the federal level. One of the things I loved about it, and the reason I've stayed with it, is we focus on stuff we can actually win. So there's things all of us care deeply about, right? But nothing is going to happen. We may talk about those a little bit. We don't spend our time and energy on those. Sadly, changes in wages has been off the table for many years. That was one of the reasons that, which was in the first film, the Good Wages Initiative is a voluntary program in Marion County run by Employ Indy. And if you have a church, business, whatever, and you pay your employees a living wage, the Good Wages Initiative will certify that. And you can then use that in your marketing. I'm a certified good wage employer. We did that because it's private and voluntary, and because the chances of the minimum wage increasing are between slim and none. I'm excited about the potential of the Good Wages Initiative. We have, I think we're at 110 employers right now, which is not overwhelming, but it's good. It's a good start. And we track how much the employers had to raise their wages in order to qualify. In other words, it's not just some really well-to-do law firm where everybody was paid really well to begin with, but did they have to raise their wages? And we've seen more than 1,000 employees get a raise of about $5,000. And that, for these families, is enormous, right? That's a huge, huge difference. Yeah.
Going and doing this like for the state is going to be a battle, to try to get that increase. But what I urge you all is, start small, right? Start at your local level. When I started at the food pantry, I realized that we were not paying people that worked at the food pantry the living wage. So that was my first battle, and I know my board was thinking, oh my God, who did we hire? Because I was pretty serious about it. I was pretty strict, and I said, that $21, if we can't do that and we're supposed to be in this field, then what are we doing? And so make your voice heard. That wouldn't have changed if I hadn't fought, and I had to, it wasn't an easy fight, but once I got that committee kind of on board and all that kind of stuff, now it's like a no-brainer for them when I bring it up, because we went through a little bit of tough work to get there. But if you are volunteering somewhere, if you're on the board, for different organizations, your employers, your kids' employers, whoever, ask those questions. Are you paying a fair wage for your staff? And if not, why? And what's the barrier there? My family owns a small business, and my brother up in Lafayette, he owns the business now, and my dad as well. And, they try to do some of those other things too that they listed in the video, like providing transport because they may not be able to pay as much, but they're trying to figure out how else can we support our staff, if it is driving them to and from and picking them up from work, if it is giving them bus passes, if it is providing free meals, free lunches for them, whatever kind of thing they can do that isn't costing the company as much money, but it's still providing an impact for that family. And that cliff, I hear about that constantly at the pantry, about people that are so concerned if they get a raise, if they get more hours, that all of a sudden they no longer are going to have benefits. And one of my friends, she's someone I've grown up with since like second grade. She was in that same boat. She was so proud that she got to get off benefits. She's a single mom with 3 kids. She was so dang proud when she got a job that she said, I don't have to have benefits anymore. She couldn't last 6 months, and was asking for loans for me and my parents and all that, because she could no longer afford childcare and food and all of that stuff. And she was making more money, and she had to go back to waiting tables, because when she went back to waiting tables, she qualified for all of the assistance. And for her, that broke my heart, because she worked so hard to get to that job, and it didn't work.
Other questions?
I'm curious, do you see any other local organizations that are making a difference, other than the ones we kind of mentioned from the film tonight, that are really helping with the food insecurity issue?
Indianapolis is blessed with actually a lot of good nonprofits. Indie Hunger Network is Gleaners, Second Helpings, Meals on Wheels, Midwest Food Bank, St. Vincent de Paul, etc. The things that for me personally, right at the moment that I'm particularly intrigued by are groups that are walking alongside families trying to get out of poverty. So circles, not a huge group, but I think they do really good work. St. Vincent de Paul now has for several years now, is a program called Changing Lives Forever, which is sort of related. They're walking alongside people, trying to help them make that journey. I don't know if were you thinking of something specific or?
No, that's great.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what I put on the sheet here. As far as things to do, one is, Corinne, share the film and raise awareness. 2 is advocate for better policies. I particularly think Bread for the World is a good way to do that. Engage employers to support good jobs. Kelsey spoke to that beautifully. Not everybody can do all these things. This is possibilities to select from, if you will. Build relationships with families facing food insecurity. So be a volunteer with Circles, be a volunteer with Changing Lives Forever. There's nothing like having a chance to really get to know somebody. And then finally, keep the food assistance network strong because, it's not the only game, but it's a critical game, and we can't afford to let it go downhill. So. And thanks for being here. My goodness.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I had one about the circles, and if you can explain more about how those are organized, and is that something that other churches, faith communities might engage in?
I think so. There's the basics is you have folks who they call circle leaders, individuals who want to make the journey, and then they pair them up with a couple of allies. So I was an ally for a while for a woman, and then the whole group, the circle leader plus their allies, get together once a week over dinner, and they have all kinds of educational opportunities, and it's a time for mutual support and sharing and encouragement. So that's the basic. What does it take to run it? You need a staff person. It's not a full-time job. I don't know what percentage of a job it is, but you need a staff person to make it go. There's a group on the south side in Johnson County. You saw Kayla Justice from Fort Wayne. There's one in Fort Wayne that she's been part of. I think we could use more in Indianapolis. I'm sure Marie Weiss would be happy to talk. I actually have a conversation with her tomorrow with a different church who's saw the film and potentially interested in starting a circles group. So.
Any other questions? Do either of you have any other things that you think are important to let folks know that we haven't thought to ask?
I mean, I think you guys showing up here is a huge step in the right direction. Even if you say, hey, I don't have time to volunteer, I don't have the funds, just being knowledgeable and be able to just speak on this subject is such a huge advocacy piece for people that are in this field. And, I think like what they said is food is not, providing the food is just one piece of the puzzle. It really is that poverty. It's a much bigger issue. A lot of our shoppers tell us the reason they're skipping meals or they're making sure their kids are fed before them is because they're worried about rent. They're worried about becoming homeless. And so that's really where their concern is right now is they don't want to get evicted. And so food may go to the bottom of the barrel. And it's something we can't live without, right? Like we have to eat every day. And so, that just breaks my heart. And I think that's, for us to be empowered and to remember we're all in this together. This is a call to action. This is not the time to, put our head in the sand. This is the time for us to come together, support our neighbors. Things may get even bumpier, unfortunately. The only way we're going to get through all of this stuff is if we lean on each other, if we build community, and if we work together.
Okay, well, thank you very much to our panelists. And thank you all for coming. Again, if you are interested in watching it again or getting other people, inviting, it's workinghungry.org. Thank you. Have a safe trip home.